As the shadow of history looms o'er the day, the Continental Congress is locked in debate. 11 for freedom, but one holding state. Thomas McKean sends a word in the night. We need you in Philly to stand for the right. Though racked with the cancer and choked by the pain, he steps to the saddle and takes up the rein. 80 long miles through the thunder and mire, a soul made of iron, a heart full of fire. No time for the doubt, no time to go slow. Into the blackness of midnight he'll go. Ride, ride me, ride through the storm and the rain. Ride for the future, forget all the pain. The lanterns are burning, the gavel is high. Let the thunder and hooves match the roar in the sky. Break through the darkness, the colony's guide. Ride, Rodney, ride.
O'Galley Electric bringing you our third hour this Tuesday morning, the second day of June of 2026. If it were 1776, we'd be a month away from getting this puppy wrapped up, and that's where Dave Bowman has taken us in this hour of Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. If you go to the show page today at BillMick.com, it's entitled God's Baseball Team. You'll see links to Dave Does History and the What the Frock podcast that Dave and Rod do every weekend. So catch up with those as you have the opportunity. They're from the show page today at BillMick.com. All right, Dave, we're a month out. Take us there, buddy.
The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. John Adams writing to his wife on July the 2nd, 1776. Why? What happened on July 2nd, 1776, that caused him to celebrate this day as the literal Independence Day of the United States of America? Well, it didn't quite work out the way he thought it would, and maybe he should have held off on the letter, who knows, but there was a lot of stuff going on that particular day and in that particular place. We have to start by going back to May 15th. Now, we have talked about the royal governors being chased out. Remember the May 10th resolves where Adams and Congress basically told all these states, look, if you get rid of your royal governor, form your own governments. And lo and behold, they did. And 5 days later, May 15th, which also happens to be the day of the preamble, the 5th Virginia Revolutionary Convention got together in Williamsburg, Virginia. Probably not at the Raleigh Tavern, as I recall. They went back to the House of Burgesses like they were supposed to. With the royal governor gone, that Dunmore fellow who did more to unite the colonies than just about anybody, the Virginia delegates voted unanimously to instruct their representatives in Congress to propose independence, not support independence, but to actually stand up and say, you know what, you need to introduce this resolution to declare us independent. It's the first colony to actually do that. North Carolina had authorized its representatives to vote for it, but not to propose it. Virginia, on the other hand, says, you know what, when you get back to your desks, stand up and propose this. There is a problem with that, however, and we'll get to that in just a second.
We will pick it up in a minute here on WMMB. So Virginia's got a big idea, Dave. What happens when they pop it on the Congress?
There is an old saying, politics is about the presentation, which is kind of goes back to our last hour in the $250 bill.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of dates back to Cicero, who we've talked about, who once said the face is a picture of the mind with the eyes as its interpreter. And that's, ancient Roman for basically saying the same thing. Politics is about presentation. The problem that the Congress has is that if John and Sam Adams stand up in the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia and introduce this resolution for independence, it's not going to be well received. It's not that the colonies aren't on board with the idea. It's not that people aren't for it. We've talked about the fact that the people of the United States want this. The problem is this Adams viewpoint, this idea that this is coming out of Massachusetts. They are viewed by some people as desperate adventurers and the radicalism of Massachusetts. They know that this...
Oh, they were fringy?
It's perceived by some as that, yes.
Okay, all right.
The problem is politics is about the presentation. And the Massachusetts delegates know that if they introduce this, it's going to cause debate. What they need is the Virginians, because Virginia is the largest colony, and it's also seen as the middlest colony. I mean, it is. It's right in the middle. And it's also seen as, in many ways, the most loyal colony to the king. In a lot of ways, Virginia is. And so what they need is Virginia to do this. And so when Richard Henry Lee shows up to Congress with this authorization from the Virginia legislature saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to go ahead and do this, now they see this as very prominent and respected Southern leadership. This all of a sudden doesn't become, Massachusetts radicalism. Now it becomes, this is systemic. The entire colonies, all 13, are now on board with this. Well, 12 of the 13 are actually on board with this. On June 7th...
He and the Adamses get together in a smoke-filled room before they go into the floor of Congress and say, here's how we've got to do this, fellas.
Probably a back room filled with smoke. I wouldn't doubt that. And Adams has his finger on everything. He knows everything that's going on. So when the resolution comes from Virginia saying you need to propose independence, there may be some of this. They may have sent it with this idea that we want to be the first, or, it's like, who wants to be the delegation to put the presidential nominee over kind of thing. But Adams, and both of the Adamses, Sam and John, recognize this fact that this is politically advantageous to have Virginia do this. If we do it, it's not going to be as well received as the presentation of Virginia doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. North Carolina could do it, but they don't have the authorization to. They just have the authorization to vote for it, not to present it. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee, and yes, he is a distant relative, presented a three-part resolution. He stands up in Congress, and it's not a declaration. It's a comprehensive blueprint for a new national structure. Remember what Congress has said back in May, which is you need to form new governments, you need to do all these things. All of the royal governors have now been expelled. In fact, Virginia's Lord Dunmore is hanging out with Josiah Martin from North Carolina. They're both on a ship. Dunmore, that's a fascinating story we don't have time to get into. Lord Dunmore is going to hang around for a long time. He becomes kind of a guerrilla-type governor, still insisting that he's the governor. He keeps sailing around to islands in Virginia, planting his flag, going, I'm in charge here. But again, a story for another day.
Mm-hmm.
Lee's presentation, his resolution, comes up with three things. Number one, we're going to declare independence, which, of course, everybody is on board with. It's easy to do. It's easy to overthrow a previous government. You shouldn't do it for light and transient causes. The second part of Lee's resolution, though, is that we need to start working on foreign alliances. A real nation has relationships with other countries, and we need to start building those. Now, the truth is that the United States, the colonies, have already entered into some of these secretly. They've been discussing things, of course, with the French, as we know, and with Spain, as we should know, but we don't talk about a whole lot. Spain actually is very helpful in the American Revolutionary War, and we almost never talk about it. The Dutch are highly involved with supplying us. These foreign alliances, which hitherto have been secretive and behind the king's back, now need to come out and be put out front and center. That's part 2 of the Lee resolution. Part 3, however, is something that when we talk about it, we sort of gloss over it. Lee insists that we must form a government. We must have a constitution for the United States before, or at least at the same time, that we declare independence. Think about that for just a minute. Most of us are aware that our Constitution does not go into effect until, 1791, for all practical purposes. It's passed in 1787. We have a couple years of debate, blah, blah, blah. But Lee's position is that we must have a Constitution now. And as part of this resolution, we are going to start working on something called the Confederation. We are going to start drafting how we are going to govern this nation before we just say, that's it, we're out of here. We are going to have a plan in place. And it's that plan that we almost never talk about, and we certainly never talk about it in terms of the American Revolution, because that plan will go into effect. However, it will not be adopted by Congress until November of next year, November of 1777, but it's being worked on right now. Starting June 7th, 1776, we start working on that plan. And if you think about it, it does take a while to come up with those things. And eventually they will become what we know today as the Articles of Confederation. Mm-hmm. And those Articles of Confederation are America's first Constitution. It's the first way we're going to run our nation. More importantly than just that, though, they help heal the deep ideological chasm that will occur over this idea of the Lee Resolution. Because as you will obviously know, there are people who are against this. There are people who are for this. There are people who are on the fence. And there's even one state that just cannot make up its mind at all and is still waiting for somebody to decide.
Gee, I wonder who that might be. We find out as we continue with Dave Does History in moments right here on Bill Mick Live on WMMB.
From muskets to microphones, the story carries on. This is Dave Does History, right here on Bill Mick Live.
O'Galley Electric bringing you this hour. And Dave, as you've noted, politics is about the presentation, and that takes some time to weed through all this stuff. What's going on next now that they've resolved to do these things? What's going to happen?
Well, it should take some time, but there is a sense of rush here. There is a sense of, we got to get this done. The problem is that this resolution now it's on the floor. Now it's out in the open. It's no longer just something being talked about in taverns, in bars. Now it's real. Now it's Congress that has been getting letters from their constituents for months saying, why aren't you doing this? Now it's there. But we've got an ideological chasm here. On one side of the chasm, you have the radicals, we'll call them that, Adams, now Lee from Virginia. They want an immediate break. They want to force the vote right now. And you can kind of look at them as a spark trying to start a fire. On the other side, you have what we could somewhat euphemistically call the moderates. I wouldn't call them loyalists because they too see the need for something of a break from Great Britain, but not quite in the same way. These are led by people like John Dickinson of Pennsylvania and Robert Morris, names that we should recognize, but they're not as on fire for this. They argue that this is going to be ruinous. If we're premature in this, it's going to be a problem. They want to secure those alliances and that confederation first. They don't the three prongs were declare independence now, but they want to wait until they have those alliances. They want to wait until they have those Articles of Confederation in place before we declare our independence. And they look at this as if we rush too fast, it will just destroy the House. John Dickinson argues that declaring independence before the securing of foreign aid from France or Spain and before finalizing that confederation is going to invite division and ruin. And if we look at the world stage today, you can see his argument. I mean, it makes sense. And he kind of suggests that he refused to, he just doesn't want to step out into this political storm until the roof has been built. I mean, this is what it comes down to. We got to have this done. And we talked about these colonies. The problem, it also exposes the colonies. You have this, what is known as the deadlocked middle. Maryland, their vote is deadlocked. Delaware, their vote is deadlocked. Pennsylvania, their vote is deadlocked. New Jersey is deadlocked right now on June 8th. All these colonies are deadlocked. New York is baffled. New York is just paralyzed. Their government back in New York, even though they've gotten rid of the royal governor, they just don't know what to do. And so they just kind of go into reset mode and they just sit there. Their government back home doesn't tell them what to do. They have no directions. Remember, North Carolina told their delegates go ahead and vote for it. Georgia told theirs to go vote for it. Delaware, New York is just paralyzed. And it's that paralyzation that is causing this not to go as smoothly, perhaps, as Lee had hoped.
So, Dave, we've got arguments for a delay. And look, I can understand. Look, we've got to be ready to run this once this is all done. We don't have a framework for doing that, but yet it's not easy to get there, and that's what we're facing now.
Well, and part of the problem is that some of these colonies, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, they don't even have their instructions from their local government. Like New York, they don't have the instructions yet. So on June 10th, after 2 days of debate, Congress decides, okay, we're going to give you 3 weeks. We're going to vote. We're going to have the vote on this resolution on July 1st. Now, this is a calculated strategic maneuver. It gives the pro-independence factions time to build their support, and it gives those middle colonies, that deadlocked middle, time to get instructions from their home governments now. Again, 3 weeks should be sufficient time. I mean, it shouldn't take that long, right? Even in the era before text messaging. Now, we've got this delay, this 3-week postponement, and so Congress says, well, we could just sit here and twiddle our thumbs for 3 weeks, or we could actually get to work. On the presumption that the Lee resolution is going to pass, we're going to form 3 committees on this, 3 congressional committees. Any idea what these 3 committees would be doing? Well, the 3 things that the Lee resolution called for. We're going to form a committee of 5, which is really going to be a committee of 3, to actually draft the Declaration of Independence. This doesn't even start until June 13th before they actually start working on it. Of course, it's Adams, Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson are the 3 that actually start working on this. And of those 3, really one actually writes it, Thomas Jefferson. He will sequester himself into his rooms, begin to work on it. Adams and Franklin will chip in as we will see in upcoming weeks. We will see how they impact this and how they change things to make them make more sense, to, in one particular case, change one sentence to become perhaps the greatest sentence ever written. In the middle, you'll have another committee headed up by John Adams. It's called the Adams Committee. And their job is to draft model treaties that they will present to these foreign governments, particularly France and Spain, but also Holland, some of the other minor nations around. There is no intention to negotiate at all with the German states, because the German states are seen as, pretty loyal to the crown and that sort of thing. And then there's a third committee, Bill, and their job is to draft the Articles of Confederation. And it's this committee that I personally find most fascinating, because imagine drafting the Constitution. We're all familiar with the 1787 Constitutional Convention. but at least they had a framework and an idea of where they were starting.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine doing this from a vacuum. Well, what are we? What are we? What are we going to be, and how are we going to do this? The guy that's put in charge of this is John Dickinson, the guy who is not all that excited about declaring independence without having that structure in place first. So he takes on that committee, and they begin to draft these Articles of Confederation. And these three committees sit down to their work. And, of course, perhaps the most important one at this point is the drafting committee, the Committee of Five, which is drafting that Declaration of Independence, because they've got to have that ready when the vote comes, so that as soon as the vote is taken, they can present this declaration for Congress to approve it or, modify it as need be in order to get that. And so the clock ticks forward to July 1st. And on July 1st, Congress gathers, ready to vote on whether or not they will have independence or not.
We'll pick it up the way that came about when Dave Does History continues on Bill Mick Live. We'll take your calls on our final segment of the day as well when we continue on WMMB.
The ink may be dry, but the arguments are still alive. Unfortunately, those people that wrote this stuff down, they're not. No. Dave Does History continues now on Bill Mick Live.
O'Galley Electric bringing you the hour. Your access, if you've got questions or comments about this part of Dave Does History, 321-768-1240. We'll get to those coming up when Dave wraps up today's look at getting this document put together. Dave, those committees, all three of them, they seem to be cross-pollinated a lot, that these same guys are working on all the elements of this.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, Robert Morris is on the Committee of Five. Obviously, John Adams is on two of the committees. It's the most important one right now is that Committee of Five that's drafting the Declaration of Independence. And it's, it seems anticlimactic in a lot of ways. We're finally writing down those 27 grievances and justifying our causes. The Committee on the Model Treaty for Foreign Alliances doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's going to come into play. And, of course, that drafting of the Articles of Confederation is important because this is the first government of the United States. And, boy, could we spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah. One of these days we need to do that just to see what didn't work well there.
By the time July 1st rolls around, this is the date that we've set for the vote, we still have a deeply divided continent. The vote, it's understood that the vote for independence has to be unanimous. That's automatic. But there's a problem. On the morning of July 1st, we have 7 states that are favored of it. We have 2 states that are against it, Pennsylvania and South Carolina. We have 1 state that doesn't know what to do, New York. And we have 1 state, Delaware, which is tied. And so Edward Rutledge of South Carolina says, you know what, we need 1 more day, which will take us to July 2nd. He feels like they can get the South Carolina thing straightened out. Franklin feels like they can get the Pennsylvania thing worked out. But that leaves Delaware. Delaware's delegation consists of 3 people, and one of them is not there. Caesar Rodney is one of the delegates from Delaware, and he is back in Dover, Delaware. Now, the reason he's in Dover, Delaware, is because he happens to be a local magistrate down there, and there is a great deal of what we would call Tory activity, and loyalist activity, the people who are agitating to not declare independence, and so he's having to deal with that back home. That's 80 miles away. Philadelphia to Dover is 80 miles by road. It's the afternoon of July 1st. We're going to have this vote in the morning. If Delaware doesn't vote or votes against this, and currently they're tied, it's not going to be unanimous, even if they get Pennsylvania and South Carolina worked out. So Thomas McKeon, the leader of the Delaware delegation, sends a message to Caesar Rodney and says, you need to get here now. Now, the problem is he's 80 miles away. Caesar Rodney is very sick. He is dying of cancer. He has bandages all over from attempts to help him. He is not in good shape. But he gets on his horse on the afternoon of July 1st. He gets on his horse, and he starts this ride to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is storming. It is pouring rain. It is lightning. It is thunder. It is a mud road. He is sick unto death, and he is going to ride 80 miles to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he can be there in the next morning. It's one of those moments in our history that we talk about Paul Revere's ride, but Paul Revere's ride was actually at least 3 other people doing the same thing. There's only one Caesar Rodney. There's only one man in the entire nation that can change Delaware's votes from no to yes. And he has to ride 80 miles in the dark through a thunderstorm while he is sicker than a dog.
Is he riding the horse himself, or is he having
He is riding himself.
Wow.
Riding a horse. If you watch some of the more popular videos, films about the Declaration of Independence, I think it's 1776, you will see him arrive in Philadelphia. They won't talk much about what it took to get him there, but on the morning of July 2nd, he will arrive in Philadelphia. He will walk into the room covered in mud, spattered, just beaten to death for the sole purpose of casting his vote, yes, so that Delaware's tie is unbroken. And today, if you're out shopping and you get some quarters and change, I know that doesn't happen very often now, but if you happen to get a Delaware quarter and you flip it over to the backside, guess whose picture you will see riding his horse on the backside of the Delaware quarter?
Wow.
Caesar Rodney. Now, the problem is you still have these other states that are, problematic. Pennsylvania, South Carolina, I guess you could call it a move for national unity. Even though John Dickinson and Robert Morris are really against this idea, they do something that is self-sacrificial. They put their own opinions behind that of what they think the nation needs and wants. And they simply don't show up to vote on July 2nd, which means that now all of a sudden those ties, those delegations in Pennsylvania and South Carolina that were no suddenly shift to yes because they didn't show up to vote. How often would that happen today? On July 2nd, then, the final vote is cast. Pennsylvania now votes yes. South Carolina now votes yes. And with Rodney's tiebreaker, Delaware votes yes. On July 2nd, 1776, the Lee Resolution passes, 12 votes yes, 0 votes no, unanimous, and 1 New York abstaining. The 12 colonies are now in favor of the resolution, the Lee Resolution, which is officially adopted, and that is the definitive legal act which severs all ties with Great Britain. And it becomes, as we know, a day to remember. As John Adams will write in his letter, his famous letter to his wife Abigail, the second day of 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival with pomp and parade, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations. Well, not quite, but at least the act of declaring independence is at long last complete.
And we pick it up in 1 minute. You want in? Now's the time. 321-768-1240. Dave Bowman and Dave Does History. Back in a minute on WMMB. You've already made WMMB the #1 preset on the iHeartRadio app. You can do the same with the Bill Mick Live podcast, the Florida Roundtable, Dave Does History, What the Flock. All of those podcasts that you're listening to regularly be right at the top of the app. 15 favorites that you can save up there. So do that now, and let's get back to Dave Does History. So They brought it together. They've committed the act. I can't imagine it's over yet, Dave.
Oh, it's not. There are so many moving parts here to what's going on. If we had 5 years to sit here and talk about all this stuff, the problem is, it's a popular radio program. You're trying to condense everything into 36 minutes or thereabouts.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't cover everything that's happening. To that end, pay attention to Dave Does History, if you would, dave.history.org. There will be, over the next several weeks, there will be extra podcasts, extra articles about things that are happening. The British still have not given up on that Southern strategy that they tried in North Carolina a couple months ago, where they were going to bust the rebellion in half.
Right.
Well, now instead of North Carolina, they're actually off of Charleston in South Carolina, where they've decided, well, maybe the South Carolinians can be persuaded. And you can pretty much imagine how well that would go over. But you've got those moving parts. You've got the Hessians are on their transport ships coming to America from Germany. You've got Parliament is still debating all of this stuff over in England. What do we do? I mean, do we really want a war over this? Or are we just... There are so many legal issues under the English Constitution about what we are doing versus what we're saying versus what they want. And, of course, you still have those issues with France. France has already met with us and is discussing. They like the idea of fighting against England. Remember, after the War of 1763, the thing that really started all of this, France had to revamp everything, their economy, their military, their navy. They had to incorporate all those lessons that they had learned. And they feel like, well, maybe we now can do this. The Marquis de Lafayette is starting to watch things and go, hey, maybe I can be helpful. All of these things are happening, even as Congress is debating all of this stuff, even as Jefferson is penning this declaration, even as Adams and Jefferson are kibitzing over the thing. And we'll talk about as much of it as we can before we get to that date. But you need to understand that we are really just scratching the surface of what happened. If you really want to get into depth of it, there are hundreds of books. I put together a list of books you can read. I highly recommend Rick Atkinson's books, his trilogy, 2 of which are now complete. But The British Are Coming covers the material. The first one covers the material that we've covered in Liberty 250. There is so much more to understand about why we do things. And this is my contention, and it will always be my contention. People who say to you that our country is flawed, our country is this, our country hasn't lived up to that, our country is bad, don't understand this history. And it's because they don't understand this history. They don't understand how we got to it. They think that they've come up with some brilliant idea. The reality is those same arguments happened in 1775 and 1776. We have a history that established how and why we're here. And you don't change things for light and transient reasons. As Jefferson would write, you make sure that you understand them, and you make sure that you have a plan to go forward from there, which so many of the people who would tear down what we have now didn't learn that lesson. They don't have that understanding. They don't have that idea that you can't just tear something down and replace it with nothing. That will fail. And if it does fail, you're doomed to devastation.
That is the sad part of this. And I think that's something, as much as we debate, as much as we discuss, as much as we have our opinions over what's happening with this government now, we don't often look farther than the immediate resolution of whatever this conflict is. And these things many times last far beyond the immediacy of a certain issue.
What's going to happen? What if you do this, what then? We don't answer those questions.
Exactly right. Thank you to O'Galley Electric. They brought you this hour. Thanks to you for being here today. Tomorrow, a wide open Wednesday. That's the one day a week. You can bring up any topic you like anytime during the call. And we'll try to revive our Friday file on Friday with a couple weeks worth of things that you can catch up on if you want. But tomorrow, wide open Wednesday. We'll see you then.
Through Dover and Smyrna, the horse takes the beat. Slipping and sliding in mud and the heat, the loyalists watch from the edge of the wood, but they can't stop a man standing up for the good. His face wrapped in linen to hide away scars, guided by nothing but hope and the stars. It's more than a vote that he carries this night. It's the birth of a nation, the dawning of light. If he falls from the stirrup, the fracture is deep. A promise to history he's sworn to keep. He spurs on the stallion, he fights for his breath. A race against time and a race against death. 80 long miles through the thunder and mire. Soul made of iron, a heart full of fire. No time for the doubt and no time to go slow. Into the blackness of midnight he'll go. Ride, Rodney, ride through the storm and the rain. Ride for the future, forget all the pain. The lanterns are burning, the gavel is high. Let the thunder and hooves match the roar in the sky. Break through the darkness, the colony's guide. Ride, Rodney, ride. The morning of July the 2nd is bright, as a weary, mud-splattered man rides into sight. He flings open the doors of the State House so wide, boot heels resounding with Delaware's pride. He votes for the charter, the tie has been broken. The words of independence are spoken.
For independence.
80 long miles through the thunder and mire. A soul made of iron, a heart full of fire. The gavel comes down and the delegates cheer. The voice of liberty is ringing out clear. Ride, Rodney, ride through the storm and the rain. Ride for the future, forget all the pain. The lanterns are burning, the gavel is high. Let the thunder and hooves match the roar in the sky. Break through the darkness, the colony's guide.